Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast post-game edition, a little delayed version. We all had to drive back from Research Stadium in Corvallis, but Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack, all on the show Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, now coming off a 49-14 victory. A game in which, for the first time this season, Oregon walks off the football field feeling extremely confident, extremely positive about the way that they played. Doesn't mean there's not room to improve. Dan Lanning pointed that out, but nonetheless, 546 yards. They scored on every single drive that they had outside of a kneel-down drive to end the first half. The defense in the second half was stellar, less than 100 yards allowed, a second-half shutout. Overall, a game that we all said, like, on paper, they should show up, they should dominate, they should win, and we should feel good about this team. But the question was, would they actually do that? Because they haven't done it the last 2 weeks, and they finally have. And this is kind of, I think, the way this game played out, how we envisioned this Oregon football team looking, which is a good thing because it's starting to show itself.
Yeah, 100%. I was one of those people who were like, Oregon is all the talent in the world and they should win every game on paper, at least so far up to this season. And I just hadn't seen it yet. And today they finally showed it. Like Matt said, 0 second half points for Oregon State. The Ducks outscored them 27-0 in the second half. Like, it was kind of very similar to what Boise State was in the third quarter, where Oregon's defense really kind of took control of the game and limited what Oregon State could do on the ground and forced some 3-and-outs. The difference was that there were no major penalties that stalled drives. Oregon scored 10 points in the third quarter, really almost 17, because Noah Whittington's 27-yard touchdown was the very first play of the fourth quarter. And they did exactly what they should have done in previous games, where they capitalized on this momentum built by their defense. Don't let dumb mistakes and penalties get in their way, and just execute at the higher level with an offensive line that's providing protection for Dylan Gabriel or running lanes for Jordan James and Noah Whittington. Like, they did exactly what we anticipated they would look like for most of the year, which is not exactly a carbon copy of last season, but still very similar properties and plays and talent level that they had last year. So they went out, they performed, they did it. They beat the crap out of Oregon State in the second half. So that was very encouraging. The first half was still a lot of fun too, but they executed. I think it kind of comes down to that. They didn't have any boneheaded plays.
Yeah, I think you asked us what would constitute like a positive outcome, or what would make us feel better going into the bye. And my whole thing was play clean, execute at a high level. That's exactly what we saw from this offense. I mean, it really couldn't have gone much better. As you said, Matt, they scored touchdowns on all but basically one drive. And that drive, they settled for a field goal, and it follows probably the only real miss of the day from Dylan Gabriel, who had Tez Johnson open in the flat for what would have been another touchdown. But it was really close to what you would hope to see and what you'd envision this team looking like. And really, the timing of this is great. As we were talking about before the game, like, if they would have laid another egg and had another stinker, and this was another fourth quarter game that could have gone either way, you go into a bye week, I'm not sure how many Duck fans would be that thrilled for the season to resume on the other side of it. Like, just think about what the discussion would be, in the comments of this video, on social media, on our message board at Duck Territory. Like, the dynamics would be not ideal for a bye week. Usually you want to go into that bye week with some positive momentum. They're absolutely doing that. We can get into some of the specifics, but everything kind of just clicked today. And while the defense had some kind of difficulties in the first half, especially on third down and getting off the field, the list of things to be concerned with coming out of this game is so much shorter than in the past. And that doesn't mean some of the first and second week problems just completely vanish, but you at least have an idea that they can correct these things and fix them and come out and play what, again, like I said, it was a clean game. I'm pleased, right? That was the question going in. I think you all feel pretty damn good about what they showed today.
9 yards a play for this offense, 13 yards per completion, 4 for 4 in the red zone for Oregon. The game in which in the first quarter, they had the ball for like 4 minutes, and the time of possession kind of evened out. They possessed it a lot in the second half. Again, I think it was 7 pass deflections. This team is becoming just absolutely terrific in defending the pass and knocking balls down at the point of attack. The run game got figured out. All the guys that were regulars running the football, Jordan James, Noah Winnington, and then we saw Dylan Gabriel get involved with the run, speed option for 54-yard touchdown run. And I think that kind of leads to where I was going with this is the offensive line. They were terrific, and there was a change. And Charlie Pickard was removed from the starting lineup at center. They moved Marcus Harper from left guard to right guard, and then Nashad Strother came in and started at left guard. And for 1 week in a game against an opponent that, let's be honest, as Dan Lanning said it, there's a talent gap between the two teams. But nonetheless, they looked really good. And is that going to be just the simple answer? Is it just, hey, like, this is the move, this is the fix? We'll probably get a better idea on that answer in 2 weeks when they go to UCLA, and we'll certainly know it in a couple more weeks when Ohio State comes. But for now, this week, it looks like that was a big fix and a big adjustment for this offense because everyone looked more comfortable, more in command of what they were supposed to do, and the mistakes just weren't there.
Yeah,
100%. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, you can go if you want. I was just going to say, for me, it was a great day for Poncho. Like, we didn't know what the center situation looked like, and for at least 4 quarters today, he was on point and performed really, really well. Go ahead. I know you have more thoughts. I'll jump in on that in a second.
Yeah, same thing. Like, Poncho was really good. He had a couple bad snaps, but nothing crazy. Like, Dylan Gabriel was able to deal with them pretty easily. But yeah, in general, I mean, it still kind of makes me wonder, like, what happened? Like, why was this not the starting 5 to begin with at the start of the year? Like, what was the Charlie Pickard experiment if they were going to go away from it so quickly? But that's for a discussion for a different day. Overall, yeah, I thought they were great. Dylan Gabriel had loads of time to throw the ball, and he was excellent. Again, 83% of his passes completed, 291 yards or whatever it was, 2 touchdowns. Like, he was great. And again, Oregon State's defensive front isn't the best. They were pretty good against San Diego State, but I don't think that's a good team, like, at all. They'll be playing Cal tonight, former Pac-12 Cal. But they were great. They were giving them as much time in the world, even on run plays where they were pulling guards or pulling tackles. They got out in space, and you saw the athleticism that this line has in the open field. On Jaden Lamar's 65-yard touchdown run, his reception on a screen pass, offensive line got out there and cleared the seas for him. So it looked really good. I don't know if it's necessarily like a be-all, end-all fixer, just having Poncho and then Strother in the lineup, but it looked a lot better against Boise State. Like, I don't really know the specific snap counts for what Charlie Pickard played in the second half against Boise State, but it was a lot less than what he played in the first half. So
I think he played 27 total snaps in the game.
Right, yeah. He played 27 total, and obviously he started the game. Like, it was very clear against Boise State, at least to me in my novice football eyes, not a football coach, that the offensive line performed better. And you saw it today. Again, Oregon State, as we all saw, not the best defense in the world, but that group of 5 was really good. And, with Bedford coming back, I'll be interested to see where he lines up.
That was the thing I wanted to touch on next, and we should spend more time celebrating or appreciating what the offensive line did, because this was so much better than what it was just a couple of weeks ago. But Matt asked kind of like, or you guys have kind of both like, is this the long-term fix? Like, is everything fixed? Well, my question coming out of the bye is, Matt Bedford was not on the injury report. I think he played on the kneel downs to conclude the game. Yeah. So he is seemingly available, and coming out of the bye, I think definitely is. Is there another shakeup coming? Right? Like, we thought going into the season, he was going to be their starting right guard. Strother played great in this game, by the way, I thought. Again, you need to rewatch it, but like, just a couple of the highlight plays, like, he's out there setting the edge on the 54-yard Dylan Gabriel touchdown run. He was upfield for the play you talked about earlier with Jaden Lamar, at least involved in kind of getting that sprung. What's going to happen at guard there? I'm just curious on now, because it seems like, they found something that really works. Dan was kind of cagey earlier in the week about, like, oh, we're going to keep rotating. We need to find the right group. Well, it seems like they at some point in the week
rotate.
Seems like at some point in the week
did.
they realized this is the 5. Let's stick with these 5. I'm just curious, like, how set in stone is this 5? Does this change now with Bedford going forward? Do you ride the hot hand, so to speak, or what's your approach? I think that'll be a question for Dan this upcoming week. But I think you just have to be thrilled with the fact that you saw a clear step taken forward. And for me, again, the Poncho part is significant because I kept thinking the only thing on this offensive line that I feel like could be systemic is if you just don't have a center who can snap or who's just getting blown off the ball. And it seemed like it was one or the other with Pickard or Poncho. And at least for 4 quarters today, the snaps weren't 100% perfect. You're right, Jared. There were a couple that were a little off, but there were no instances like we saw against Boise State where the snap timing was off. And pre-snap, it seemed like everything kind of went to plan. So it seems like they found it. It seems like they found their center is, I guess, just where I'm landing.
Well, he was the center for all of the spring and all of the summer and all of the fall. He was anointed the center and practiced at center. And then, 2.5 weeks before the season began, it's like, well, I don't know. So yeah, you want to know who's the most comfortable guy working with Dylan Gabriel? Like the dude who's been working with Dylan Gabriel for the past 6 months. So it was really good. There were seemingly a lot more communication along the offensive line with Dylan Gabriel and just looking at protections and everything. So that was certainly a positive development. Oregon State didn't really send like the same kind of pressure that Boise State did, especially in like empty sets. And I know, Eric, you and I talked about that during the game, but there still seemed to be like a better communication pattern there. And as for the Bedford thing, I think there's like 2 options here. Is that you continue to ride the hot hand with Strother and just say like Bedford becomes the Poncho of last year where he comes in and situationally rotates with Bedford, or excuse me, with Strother or Harper, whoever it is. Or, I mean, Bedford, I think, is the more talented player, just flat out, than Nishad Strother, even though Strother was really good today. And they just move him in the line, and then Strother is the 6th man. But either way, I think this is absolutely, very certainly a step in the positive direction for Oregon's offensive line, considering where it was the last 2 weeks in both of our podcasts after the game were all, what the heck is going on with this offensive line?
Big picture wise for the offensive line, I think this performance kind of eases some of the pressure that was unfairly mounting on Bedford for when he gets back, of like, hey, you're going to have to be this all-American caliber guy, because that's kind of what you've manufacturally been propped up as with your injury and the issues that we're seeing along everywhere else. Now we've seen this group play at a high level without Bedford. And so like, it's there without him, and I'm not trying to like devalue Bedford's return, because I agree with Jared. I think he's straight up a better player, but now it kind of eases a little bit of the pressure that you've got to be really good when you step on the field for your first real action. They can kind of ease them back into things. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. Maybe Dan Lanning after the game said, like, first thing they're going to do is they're going to self-assess. They're going to go and look at, where their deficiencies are, what's happening, how do they fix it, how do they exploit, the areas that they are really good at already and make them better. And then maybe through that process, it's really hashing out Strother versus Bedford in camp. I will say, like, I don't know how much we're going to see of Charlie Pickard moving forward. Like, he's probably not going to play a lot.
I don't know about that.
It was a great story, but I think clearly we've identified the better center. And I just think that part is in the past. It's in the rear view. We know who the center is. Now it's to the point we've just made here. Who's that third, who the 2 guards is where you're at. So I also, just last thing on the O-line, I thought they did a good job of playing to their strengths a little bit more here in terms of just, as Jared kind of said, you got a really athletic group of guys. Get them out in space, let them take care of it. And again, I think in pass protection, it was so much better today. Dylan said it after the game that he didn't think he was almost touched the whole game. And I can't think of a time where he was really pressured. And there was that one, I don't remember, I think it was the first drive of the second half, where he had like 4 or 5 seconds to scan and go through progressions and then deliver a great pass, I think, for a first downfield. And I just thought that was really sort of symptomatic of, I don't know if that's something we had really seen the first 2 games at all, of him being able to just go through the entirety of the progression.
No, I agree. And there's only one pressure that I really remember, and it was on the touchdown pass to Trayshawn Holden, where Dylan Gabriel, there was pressure up the middle, and he just went whoop and stepped to his right and then fired a laser to Trayshawn. And you're right, Eric. Like the first 2 games of the season, like even when Dylan was seemingly in a rhythm, they were really quick hitters. They were quick outs, quick slants, quick in routes, like just something to get the ball out quick because he didn't have the time. There were multiple times today where he got the snap, sat back, went through read 1, 2, 3, said, all right, it's covered downfield. Here, I'll take the drop-off route to a running back, to Terrence Ferguson, to somebody else, where you then see like, oh yeah, this is a guy who's played for 5 years in college football and understands how to read a defense and make the right read and not put the ball in jeopardy. It's like, that's kind of what it was last season. And that offense was pretty good. So again, very encouraging.
I think what's going to get lost in the shuffle offensively, maybe this is the last kind of topic we talk here, unless there's some other things that you have, but Dylan Gabriel was absolutely tremendous today.
Yeah.
It's going to get lost in the shuffle of how good the offensive line was and how big of a story it was of it getting them back in the groove of things. But 20 of 24, 291 passing, 2 touchdowns, QB rating of 212. He ran for a touchdown. A lot of that was because he had perfect protection. But this is what we've been talking about, where we've seen it the first 2 weeks in spurts, where it's like, hey, if you give him the opportunity to read the defense, this offense is freaking good. And that was on display today. He was really good and one of the better performances. And I know it's only 3 games, but I think people that last couple of weeks that were kind of hammering Will Stein as an offensive coordinator need to step down a little bit, because he improved Bo Nix in year 2, and it's through 3 games, and Gabriel's completing 84% of his passes. That's 7% more than what Bo Nix did last year, which was outrageous. Yeah. This offense is tremendous when given the opportunity to execute, and today was the day that we saw it.
Yeah, but go ahead.
I was going to say, I just wanted to read his stats through 3 games. 79 for 94, 914 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Pretty good.
It's all right. Yeah, and like the Idaho game, those stats kind of felt empty, like the 41 of 49, because you're like, this is the only way they can move the ball down the field. And you saw today, it's the same how it worked all of last season, basically. Like Will Stein's playbook is really darn good. And when you give the quarterback time to read through the options, like there's always a route for a quarterback to throw to in Will Stein's system. There's obviously the deep ball, which really wasn't used at all today, which is fine because they moved the ball. They got 15 yards a chunk. Like it didn't really matter, but you have the deep ball, you have the intermediate route, and you have the dump off just in case there's something that goes awry. And I think, what did Gabriel say after the game? Like he told his offensive line, if you give me the time, I'll do the crime. Like that's it's exactly what he has done, or what he did today. And if that can happen more consistently from Oregon's offensive line, like I don't think he can keep up these stats, because like we just went through, they're absurd to complete over 80% of your passes in a single season. But man, I mean, a couple of the passes he missed were like easy completions. Like he just missed them, and he's a human and he makes mistakes, but like these are easy reads. And when you have a quarterback who has this much experience and this much talent, like this is what you expect. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's delivering these expectations.
Fun thing about this offense is it's pretty much able to incorporate anybody, any given game. Think about last week, Tez, 3 catches, like negative yards. This week, 100 yards.
Yeah.
Evan Stewart had the big game against Boise, 3 for 26, I think, today. This pass attack is just able to, depending upon the matchups, kind of maximize everything. And I think that's really, really encouraging. I thought Terrence Ferguson had a really valuable day in terms of just being reliable early on. It seems like they incorporated him a little bit more early, which I, as a big Terrence Ferguson fan, thought that was important to do. And then just kind of the last part on the offense, because I know we need to get to defense and maybe some concerns there, but the run game took a big step. Dylan had the long one. Jordan continues to run his rear off and just make so much out of limited holes, it seems like. And Noah Whittington, certainly his best game as a Duck back from the ACL. Was it averaging, I think, less than 3 yards per carry on the ground coming in?
That's now 9 after today.
I was going to say tonight, now it's a lot more because he had a couple of the long runs. So yeah, just in general on offense, just wanted to tie some, kind of tie that up. There was huge steps taken up front, but pass game and run game, I thought were both big improvements. And you see why everyone was so optimistic about how all of this could come together today.
Erik talked about it defensively. Game started off interesting. I mean, Oregon State's first drive of the game went 11 plays, 49 yards, but they missed the field goal, but they chewed up almost 5 minutes of clock, and then Oregon went down and scored pretty easily. And then the question was, all right, get another stop and build some momentum. But then 13 plays, 75 yards, almost 7 minutes, they scored. And then they got the ball late in the second half or second quarter and went 14 plays and 622, or not 622, but they chewed off 6 minutes of clock and scored a late touchdown just before half. And all of a sudden you're kind of like, this defense is, what's going on? Like they were playing, they were not allowing anything over the top. No explosion plays. They're everything in front of them, but they weren't making the plays to get off the field. They had multiple third down situations that they could have had, 3rd and 10s multiple times, and they just allowed first downs. And then, like as Dan pointed out, a tale of two halves. The second half, they were absolutely tremendous. 2 straight 3-and-outs. Oregon State's last 2 drives ended on downs. They had 3 straight punts to start the game in the second half. They were unbelievably good in the second half. And we got to see kind of the pressures and the pass deflections. We saw Tatum Tuioti and Bryce Betcher have tremendous games. I'm sure there's going to be others that pop when we rewatch the game, but those 2 names immediately jump out. But it was just a half of football that was really good and a half of football that you were kind of like, is this a concern or is it not a concern?
Yeah, the first half was interesting. It was, it started the first drive of the game, like you said, Matt, where it's a 3rd down and 15 and Giovanni McCoy runs for like 20, 37 yards and then like 10 yards gets brought back afterwards. But they ran the ball pretty well. It was a very Oregon State style of attack where they're trying to run and trying to drain as much clock as they can. And that's what you should do as an underdog, to try to just limit how often the other team can get the ball. And they did that. There were a bunch of 3rd down conversions, a lot of 3rd and short conversions. I wish I had the stats from the first half about their average 3rd down distance, because in the game, it was like, I think it's like the 5.6 or 6 point something, like 5.4. And that feels, that's pretty good, but that feels a lot longer than it probably was in the first half. And Oregon State, like, credit to them, they just ran the ball and they had 80 rushing yards in the first quarter. Like, they did their job. And then Oregon just made an adjustment. They're like, we know that your talent on the outside can't beat us deep, and you could try if you'd like to, but if you hold the ball for longer than 3 seconds, somebody from our defensive line will be in the backfield at your quarterback, and then you're going to have to make a throw under duress, which I think Giovanni McCoy was talented. I think that he honestly was pretty darn good today, but he doesn't have the weapons to kind of contend with Oregon's defensive backs in the secondary and their ability to read a pass. And so Oregon State, they just had a lot of dinks and dumps. It was quick 3-yard hitters that hopefully were going to go for 3 to 5 more extra yards after the contact. And Oregon just stopped that in the second half. They just said, all right, we're going to sit. We're going to like down at the 3-5 yard line away from the line of scrimmage. And if you throw a pass, we're going to have 2 guys on him and tackle him. And that's exactly what happened. And they just stopped moving the ball. They stopped moving the ball for 3 yards and then getting 6 yards after contact, or just a bunch of yak, and then it just stopped in the second half. And that's exactly what they did. So it was another good defensive adjustment from Tosh Lupoy and company.
Yeah, I've seen people be really critical of Tosh and Dan for in-game adjustments. Thought this was a great example of why maybe that's unfair. And as you said, Jared, it felt like, how many times in the first half it was like either the slot or the outside guy just ran like a little comeback route, a little stick route, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Like you said, for like 4 yards, and it just worked every time. And in the second half, it felt like those plays were either more contested in terms of the catch, or they were caught and immediately went down. Yeah. And I just thought the open field tackling in the second half was great. And in the first half, as we said, it was really, Oregon State was 6 of 9 on third. Like, that was the story of that half. I don't think there was, to Matt's point, like, no explosive plays. They had their longest run all day from a running back was 8 yards. Their longest pass play, oh shoot, I just had it pulled up, was 18 yards. I think they only had 4 pass plays of more than 10. And
18 yards in the fourth quarter.
True. So, like, if you just pull this together, they had, I think, 4 plays the entire game before that, if you exclude the last one, of more than 10 yards. And one of them was that McCoy scramble. So, like, I just think the defense overall played really well. In moments of it, it was very frustrating because it was pretty obvious, at least from my vantage point, like Oregon State doesn't have the guys on the outside to win really at all. And credit to, I think it's Walker for a couple of big receptions and for turning a screen pass into a first down and for beating Jamar Muhammad on a slant route to extend a drive, like a couple nice moments. But they basically had one guy, and that guy wasn't exactly, isn't going to blow anyone's socks off, I guess. And I thought the adjustments were great. And really the ability to stop the run game. Oregon State, it's 2 running backs who both been averaging over 100 yards, held to less than 100 combined and averaged fewer than 4 yards each. I thought this was a really impressive effort in its totality, while acknowledging their fans who I'm sure were very frustrated, and I think at times rightfully so, for the inability to get off the field on third. Because that's the thing where if you're an Oregon fan, you've seen this picture before. I think it was just kind of like, gosh, can we not finish this drive? How many times did it feel like you should have gotten off the field and you couldn't?
Yeah, there was one of the, I think it was the first or second touchdown drive for Oregon State, had that like miraculous catch, the juggling catch on the sideline on 3rd and 5. And it's like, well, there's like how they should have gotten off the field, but the guy just like, I don't know how he caught that. So like sometimes you're just kind of unlucky in those situations, but like I still think the defense was really damn good, and and then obviously very much showed it in the second half.
Bryce Betcher's, is he the best linebacker right now on this team? I mean, he plays the most. Devin Jackson.
Yeah, considering Jeff doesn't play anymore. Yeah.
I would vote yes right now. Through 3 games, I think he's been their best. Through 3 games, he's been their best linebacker and like probably one of their 4 best defensive players.
10 total tackles, 4 of them solo, 2 pass breakups. Both of those tackles and pass breakups, both being career highs for him. And to Jared's point, like Bossa didn't start this game. I'll be curious to see what the snap counts were, but
it's low.
Like he was really only out there on like 3rd and down passing situations.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was out there for. Just 3rd and longs.
Linebacker rotation in general is just strange. Justin Jacobs started too.
And then I bet you Devin Jackson and Bryce Betcher out-snap both those guys by a pretty good amount. I think Justin played probably a little bit more than he did against Boise and Idaho, but it felt like for a time there they played a lot of Devin and a lot of Bryce. And I don't think it was a bad thing necessarily. I do think there were some of those early drives where Oregon State had success. There was some maybe breakdowns by some of the linebackers, but
yeah,
it's not bad.
Screen passes, those were like a couple of them were linebacker faults. I don't know whose it was, but those like screen passes in general are a linebacker's job to figure out who's going to go and cover that. And if you're dropping back into coverage and your head isn't towards the quarterback, you don't know what's going on as a linebacker, then that's how screens work. So, well, I'll have to go back and look at it, but I mean, they played a hell of a lot better. Whoever was messing up on the first half was certainly not doing that in the second half, nor were they giving the opportunities for Oregon State to do any of those things. But Matt, like you mentioned, Tuioti, Tatum, I thought he had a great game. Yeah, and I think that this environment with a run-heavy team is exactly what Tuioti's made for, while Mateo is probably made for a team that's going to be more like a spread offense and give them more time to rush the passer. But Tuioti, like when they needed him to be really damn good, he was excellent.
Yeah, no, it's been again another fun part. Talked about an offense with just the ability to incorporate different receivers or skill guys. Mateo had a great debut in the first game, and then today Mateo was excellent. Or sorry, Tatum was excellent, and It's interesting looking at it. This is just a slight digression, but it feels like they've kind of played Blake Purchase out of the rotation a little bit, which is
I was just bring him up.
It's a little surprising. He didn't really play at all, so 3 games.
No, they've got a Jaden Moore above him.
That was notable to me today as well. So,
yeah, which I don't think no one probably had that on their bingo card. Like Purchase was good in last season, and Jaden Moore's through 3 games at least feels like he's kind of passed him on the depth chart. Maybe we don't know. special teams real quick. Like we saw a field goal. We saw 2 of them go through. And the last one was kind of like the last chance for Oregon State fans to kind of have anything positive to say about the game if he had missed it. But he knocked it in from like 35 or 34 yards or so. But special teams wise, like punt returns were solid when they needed to be. Kickoff coverage was great. There was no offsides on kickoffs. They didn't have to punt. So like special teams wise, things seem to be going good. And, this is probably – it is the best game that they've played since the Liberty game and the Fiesta Bowl. They're playing good football now. And I guess the question becomes like, it sounds crazy, but like this is a week where like we all agree probably that the bye week's here at a good time to get them healthy. But the way that they're playing today, you're almost kind of like you didn't wish there was a bye week. So they come right back out next week and keep building on the momentum that they've got established. But they're going to hit the road again in 2 weeks. Dan Lanning said they're going to use the bye week to their advantage. They don't make the schedule, which to me was code. Like, sucks that we have to have a bye week this early in the season. But nonetheless, positive momentum after a win. They're 3-0. They will be going to UCLA in 2 weeks. And some of these questions have been answered, and some of them are probably going to be let's see them do it again now.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it to close, Matt, is I think this is what this team can look like every Saturday. And frankly, seeing it today makes you a little bit frustrated for what you saw the first 2 weeks, just in terms of how far off it seems like they were to reaching their potential. But now it's, can they stack these? Can they play this way each and every week? Because I think you get the bye week. And as you said, Matt, I probably agree. I was seeing them play like this. I just want to see them play again. But you now have 2 more games leading into Ohio State to build further momentum, games against teams you should beat. And I think, I don't know what the final score was, but Indiana was up like four touchdowns on UCLA earlier.
I think it was 42-13.
Yeah, that was the last score I saw. So that game doesn't look particularly tough. And so my point is, you now have to do this week in and week out, and to develop the momentum going to that Ohio State game where, not that it matters too much, but where the 3 of us can go into that game going like, I think Oregon has a real shot to win, because certainly coming out of these first 2 games, none of us were like, oh yeah, that Buckeye team looks really beatable the way the Ducks are playing. Yeah. If they can stack some more of this together, I think that will sort of change at least some of how we're feeling going into that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have anything else.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on this post-game edition. Once we get the schedule for the bye week, that will dictate a little bit of what we're going to do from a podcast standpoint. I don't know if we're going to do every single day like we used to, but we'll still have some. The mailbag will be on Monday for sure, a midweek with check-in with Dan, and then from there we'll figure something else out. But it's bye week. Enjoy the weekend off. We'll have more coverage of this Oregon State game on duckterritory.com later tonight, and also Sunday, Monday. And then we'll have some stuff up throughout the week as well for your reading pleasure. But until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.